And Scott, is your last name, how do you pronounce your last name? So I don't say it incorrectly.
No problem. Rasmussen.
Rasmussen?
Perfect.
Okay, it's 1 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and get started. 3, 2, 1, start.
Hi to everyone joining. We're going to wait just a minute or two to let everybody get into the webinar and get settled, and we'll get started. Okay, it looks like our ticker slowed down. So Lauren and Scott, if you all are ready, I guess people can just jump on for the next minute or two. But thank you everyone for joining us today to talk about the emergency broadband benefit on today's day of action. We're excited to have you and to spend the next hour together talking about sort of the benefits of this program and the ways that sort of your organizations can help promote it, and so that we can get as many people into the program as possible that are eligible and take the steps that we are to close the digital divide. I'm excited to have you all here today. My name is, if my PowerPoint works correctly. My name is Lucas Peterzak. I am a policy associate with Next Century Cities, and I'm very excited to have two phenomenal panelists with us here today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves as well. So first we have Lauren Moore. Lauren, if you want to kick us off with an introduction.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me today. My name is Lauren Moore. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Libraries at the New York State Education Department and New York State Librarian. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation about the emergency broadband benefit and how we can all work together to help get eligible households enrolled. I'll stop there, right?
That's perfect, thank you.
Okay.
And I'm also excited to introduce Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Rasmussen. I manage New York State's Broadband Program Office. Largely, we're an investment type agency investing in rural broadband deployment across the state. But an incredibly important part of our mission is digital inclusion and making sure that all New Yorkers have the opportunity to connect online. And EBB is the biggest game in town right now, and we're thrilled to try to find ways to support it.
Awesome, thank you both. And so we're going to spend some time talking about a variety of topics today individually, and then we're going to take some questions as a panel, and then we will happily open it up to you all that are joining us for any questions you might have, big or small. If you have questions throughout, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A tool or to put them in the chat. We also have team members from all of our offices here to answer questions along the way or direct you down the right path if we don't happen to have the correct answer. I also already told Lauren and Scott, but I always like to give a warning that my dog is notorious for finding out when I'm speaking on calls. So if you all hear jingling or squeaky toys in the background, I apologize. But I think we all have experienced the fun of being at home with our pets over the last 15 months. But the first thing I want to do is talk about the way that Next Century Cities, my organization, and our 217 member municipalities across the country have really been activating their resources to not only promote the emergency broadband benefit, but ensure that everyone understands really how big of an impact this is and the power that this program has to bring families online that not only have been struggling to connect for a number of years, but especially those who, due to the economic downturn from the pandemic, are really struggling to stay online throughout sort of these unprecedented times. And we've had a number of local governments over the last few weeks and even the last month, and there's the jingling I talked about if you can hear it, who have really been stepping up to host web pages, to put out press releases, and to have some really good conversations at the hyper-local level to make sure people understand not only how to apply, but what to do with this money and with this program when they get it. And so I want to start out by highlighting a number of these cities. I've included just sort of a brief snapshot of what they've done, and hopefully it'll give you all some insight if you're looking for ways to promote the program further. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, one of our NCC members, they recently stood up a digital equity study, which was a number of years in the making. But as a part of that study, they've actually taken steps to promote the EBB and sort of highlight how crucial that's going to be over the next few months to closing the digital equity gap in Cambridge, because they have started to see that it is not only an access issue for their community, but also an affordability issue. Next up, in Boston, Massachusetts, Boston is known for a very robust digital equity fund that has been connecting people for a number of years now. And as a part of the EBB's rollout, Boston is now highlighting this program to their local residents and making sure that people know, even beyond the city's resources, there are a phenomenal number of resources at the federal level, such as the EBB, that can help supplement what's going on in Boston. We've also seen communities out west, such as San Miguel, that are using social media, which is something that I know a lot of local governments have been getting into, especially Twitter, to reach more diverse audiences beyond people who might be accessing their official city websites or might be going to city council meetings. We understand that as more people have turned to Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter, that is where you have to reach them. And we've seen that, the number of people accessing mobile applications and mobile devices is going up. And if we're able to get to them and let them know that a new program is coming out, that's a major way that we can drive up registering eligible households, or at least letting them know that they're eligible. In a few of our other communities, such as in York County, they're integrating it right onto like the homepage of their benefits and services. We learned that these are places where, people are already going, and a lot of our members have recognized that by including sort of the public relations and the outreach materials into places where people are already looking, they're not having to convince people to go to a whole new webpage. They can instead reach out to these groups that are already qualifying for different programs, free and reduced lunch, social services from the municipal government. And by including it with these other services, they're able to cut down on that administrative burden of trying to navigate a new program and say, listen, we already know who our target audience is. Why not take steps to reach out directly to them where we know they can be found? In Lincoln, Nebraska, their mayor's roundtable has actually brought up this topic in person. And by highlighting this all the way up to the chief executive for Lincoln, they've been able to sort of bring it to the people and include it in these high-level conversations. Because a lot of our communities, and I'm sure organizations that you all belong to, have recognized that while a lot of us have been talking about broadband for a very long time, it wasn't really this mainline issue that everybody was discussing until COVID-19 hit. And there was a real awakening across the country, not just in our members, but in likely every city and county across the country, that broadband was no longer a luxury. It hadn't been for a long time, but it was something that we were seeing students and senior citizens and people being forced offline when they needed to be connected. And so by elevating it to these very important meetings, we're able to say, listen, this is a priority for Lincoln. This is a priority for our organization or for our community. We saw in Homer, Alaska, a continent away, that linking to federal programs and federal resources is another great way to connect people with what's going on without having to stand up resources on your own. The FCC and USAC are putting out a lot of great things, whether it's frequently asked questions, hotlines, webinars, and they're things that if your group or your community don't have the ability to host your own webinar or an event like this, we understand, and that makes total sense, but your ability to point people to pre-existing webinars is great, especially because a webinar like this is going to have probably much more comprehensive answers than one of us on this panel might be able to give right now. Because when you go straight to the source, you're able to get the most updated, most relevant information. We also saw that even in somewhere like Center County, Pennsylvania, simply distributing FCC documents out to your citizens and re-upping it is another great way. This is probably a very sort of easy lift for a community that doesn't have a ton of time or resources to devote to promoting the program. But there are great people at the FCC who are doing their best to create materials like this one pager. And being able to share those with your residents just puts it in front of them one additional time and allows them to keep seeing that this program is happening. And the more we talk about it, the more likely, and there's a fun appearance from my dog, the more likely we are to be able to convince people. And as I click through the rest of these, I'm not going to read all of them to you, but you can see that the ways that these communities across the country have promoted the program, they vary widely, because something that we've recognized at Next Century Cities through all of our work is that no single solution exists to close the digital divide. And in turn, no single solution exists to promote this program. We understand that everyone is sort of coming from a different place, but we're doing our best as an organization to elevate this as much as we can. And if you're missing some of these as I click through, one thing that we've done at NCC to try to support our members and non-member municipalities is we've actually created an EBB resource page that we've stood up a few weeks ago. And if you simply go to nextcenturycities.org for today, it is the first landing page that you land on. And you can go through and see the dozens of local and state and federal resources that have been stood up since the EBB was first announced. And we've recognized that bringing all of these resources together into one space for us is the best way that we can activate our time and try to connect people. And I know we're going to talk more throughout the webinar. Oh, I went too far. There's Lauren again. I know we're going to talk more throughout the webinar today about the ways that you all can sort of promote this in your communities. And like Lauren said, get as many eligible people signed up as possible. But know that you don't have to host an entire day of action, or you don't have to have this huge in-person, sign up rally or sign up fair. And if that works for your community, then that's phenomenal. And Next Century Cities would be more excited to help in any way possible to pull that off. But by simply having these conversations, by mentioning things in different organizational meetings, by saying it to as many people as you know, we know that we can up those numbers. And I know Lauren and Scott would likely agree that we've seen with Lifeline that, a very small portion of the eligible populations are signing up. And I think the last time I checked, it was somewhere down in the mid-20s in terms of the percent of eligible households. And I know that this is a great opportunity for us to sort of right that wrong and take what is going to be a phenomenal program for people across the country in small towns, big cities, on tribal land, wherever, and say, listen, we understand that this is necessary. And we know that if this program performs well, we may be able to see it continue. So I'm excited to have this conversation with everyone today. And like I said, all of these resources that have been stood up by these different communities are available on our website. And I encourage you to look through them and to see what's going on, because it's happening coast to coast. And it's happening across New York. And everyone can do a little part, everyone can do a big part, but all of it's going to sort of come together. And as the saying goes, that I'm going to butcher, a rising tide lifts all boats, I believe is the saying. And so if all of us are coming together, even one more household online could be make or break for a kid in school or someone trying to get a job. So I'm happy now to hand it over to Lauren, who is going to be talking a little bit about the roles of schools and libraries in this whole EBB conversation that we have.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's so exciting to see the actions of municipalities and local governments across the country around this issue. And it's exciting to think about the ways that schools and libraries fit into this bigger picture. Throughout the pandemic and throughout all conversations about digital equity, the state education department has said again and again, this isn't a problem that the state education department can solve on its own. It's not a problem that schools or libraries can solve on their own. It's not a problem that anyone can solve on their own. It's a problem that's going to take everyone working together to make a meaningful difference to end systemic inequities that result in these long-term digital inequities, right? This problem is huge. But communication around the emergency broadband benefit is a really great opportunity for us all to come together. And the role of schools and libraries, I don't think, again, is necessarily enrolling every single individual, but it's about using the networks that we have as a public infrastructure to help make sure that the important messaging around emergency broadband benefit gets not just to the individuals who are eligible, but also the communities and the community-based organizations that can help do that deep work to get people online. So that is really the role that I see for schools and libraries. We have connections with communities, we have connections with individuals, we have connections with organizations. So how do we use these connections to get the message out in a way that goes beyond the advertising, but to the point where we're helping people understand the benefit, understand if they're eligible, go through the steps of enrolling, which are different depending on how you're eligible, which are different depending on your circumstances. So there's definitely a high touch aspect to this process. And libraries and schools are in a really great position to help bring communities together to do that high touch, high resource kind of work in the end. Before we go any further, I want to thank all of the people who've helped me understand the emergency broadband benefit better. I really am more just a conduit of their really strong messaging and their work, and that starts with Next Century Cities. So thank you for having this event. The National Digital Inclusion Alliance, the Western New York Library Resource Council, Media Justice, the Public Utility Law Project, the Brooklyn Public Library, the Bronx Digital Equity Coalition, the regional information centers across New York State. These are all organizations that have developed their own resources, that are using their own networks and their own connections to do this meaningful work. So I'm really looking forward for opportunities for schools and libraries to work with those organizations, to work with local governments, to work with other state agencies to make a meaningful difference.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lauren. We appreciate it. And now I would love to give a few minutes to Scott to talk about sort of state partnerships and working across the state. So Scott, you are welcome to take it away.
Right. Thanks so much. And thanks again for having me here. To just echo what Lauren was saying about thanking Next Century Cities for hosting us. Lauren and I actually got on the phone not 2 months ago, maybe, and said, who should we call about EBB? How do we get the word out? Who do we need to contact? And Next Century City was the immediate logical answer to that. And we got on the phone and we're immediately in contact with all of you. So thanks a lot for hosting this event today. It may sound obvious, but outreach really begins with what you know best, right? And for us, I'm at the Broadband Program Office for New York State, and that means working with participants of our program. And we've traditionally funded infrastructure deployment. That's our general kind of reason of being. And it's generally focused on rural deployment in unserved and underserved communities. But as Lauren was describing, obviously, and as Lucas, you as well, there's been a lot of shifts since COVID. There's been a lot more questions. There's a lot more emphasis on accessibility, affordability, digital inclusion, ways to make sure that everyone in our communities is connected and not just that they have broadband available to them. So we found ourselves in a big pivot in our office of trying to think about these issues in new ways and trying to understand how it is that we as an agency, as state government, can play an active role in this. And we've actually done a lot in New York State, and I'm incredibly proud of that. But as I mentioned, we began our outreach efforts with folks that we knew best. That's the 32 private ISPs that participate in our program. And as soon as we had clear indication on EBB, it was coming, what's going on, and how it was going to be rolling out, we started outreach to those ISPs first. Our kind of first plan of attack in this was making sure that every provider in New York State was enrolled in the program and that every person, no matter where you lived in the state, would be eligible to participate. And I think that's, it's a critical first step, and it's something that everybody should be looking at the provider lists online given by the FCC and making sure that everyone they know in the state is signed up, enrolled, and able to serve, because many areas of New York State, for example, people may only have access to one internet service provider. And so we need to make sure that everyone's enrolled. So that was our first step in our office, and absolutely what I would encourage others to kind of approach this issue as. And then also, now most states have broadband program offices, very much like our own, doing kind of grant making, traditional deployment. But I'd really encourage everybody on this call to get in touch with your state broadband program office. That's me. If you live in New York State, by all means, reach out to our office. But these are generally passionate public servants who are dedicated to trying to make sure that there's universal access in their state and have a lot of those long-term connections with ISPs and others. And so would absolutely encourage folks to do that. Also, as an office, we began immediately implementing EBB language into all of our constituent correspondence. If you contact our office about almost any issue, we will respond to you with a big, bold notification saying, the emergency broadband benefit program is starting. Here's how you enroll. Share the information with others. We also put, big real estate onto our state website. We stood up the an affordable broadband portal, so another website. So when people are searching, oh, what kind of options do I have in New York State? They're getting to another website that we had set up to make sure, and with lots of information about how to enroll. And then from there, we began engaging with our biggest partner in state government, which is state government. We find ourselves working all the time with other state agencies, our office with Lauren, with anyone from Department of Transportation to housing agencies and others. And our office really took an approach of trying to map it out. We looked at what are the eligibility criteria and what are the state agencies that interact with those individuals. I wish that I had brought with me the actual map that we created, but we actually wrote it down. And I really encourage everybody to go through that exercise as well and figuring out what are the various agencies, what are they doing, and are they talking to each other to make sure that their kind of efforts are working together. In many ways, that's exactly how, in some cases, this webinar came together. I called Lauren and said, what are we doing about EBB in the state? What do we need to be doing? What more can we be doing? And those kinds of basic questions and fostering those relationships across state government, I think, are incredibly important so that the various agencies like our own, we're an economic development agency. We work with businesses all across the state, not just ISPs, of course, and getting the word out to stakeholders, to people on the ground who are able to influence others and try to encourage folks to participate. So with that, that's my kind of spiel on it, but looking forward to be able to talk more about some of the details of the program and answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Scott. So I'm going to cancel sharing my screen so we can all see each other. Hello. So I have a few questions for you all. If any of the audience members continue to have questions, please feel free to place them in the chat or the Q&A like I mentioned, and we are happy to get to them, or someone from our team will. But the first question I have for either Scott or Lauren or both is very basic, but probably the most important in my mind. And it was, why is the emergency broadband benefit so important to closing the access and affordability gap in this moment?
Are you waiting for me to go first, Scott?
Go for it, Lauren. All you.
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. I've been, every chance I get talking about the fact that about 20% of New Yorkers can't afford internet access in their homes. And this is a solution. It is an emergency solution. It's short term, but it's something that we can do right now to make an immediate difference in those people's lives during this moment where being online is incredibly important. So I think it's a chance to move the needle quickly. And I think one thing that we can do as we build participation in this program is think about some longer term outcomes as well. So for example, if eligible households enroll in this and they are eligible for Lifeline moving forward, then they become Lifeline recipients. And that is just one of the longer term, more sustainable solutions that we can get from this emergency action.
Absolutely agreed. Absolutely banking on Lifeline modernization under this FCC and hoping we get to move that forward and see that program really working for all. But also just to build on what you were saying, Lauren, I think this is an opportunity to start creating these networks, right? I think so much, especially I can speak, at least from the state government perspective, we've really been focused on deployment, and that's been kind of the centerpiece of many of our efforts. And we've built coalitions around that, right? You build coalitions to be able to get the work done that you need to get done. And this is a rare opportunity to build a different type of coalitions, I think, in our states. It's not typical that Lauren and I would be working or appearing together on a webinar and working together on this. It's not the kind of traditional broadband approach that I think you've often seen. And this is an opportunity for us to kind of create new networks, create digital inclusion coalitions in our states to do that kind of work so that we can, not just have success with EBB, but be able to actually have those, ongoing efforts from whatever they may be and whatever may be required.
Thank you both for that. And I think your highlight of sort of building these broader digital inclusion coalitions has been so important for the last year, and understanding where non-traditional broadband adjacent organizations have started to play a really important role in these conversations. And I know you mentioned sort of this modernization of Lifeline that we're all hoping for. And I think a question on a lot of people's minds as we work on this outreach is, obviously we've seen with Lifeline that even with sort of our organizations and peer organizations pushing the program, we continue to see these low enrollment rates of eligible populations. And my question is, how can local organizations sort of combat this long existing challenge of getting people enrolled in a federal subsidy going forward with EBB so that we can, break through these mid 20% enrollments and get as many households as possible that need this support?
I think we sometimes underestimate the challenges to enrolling in a federal program, or the challenges to doing and like filling out any form. Signing your kids up for camp is like I don't know, it's a type of thing that makes me feel anxious and stressed out. And I think it's the same kind of it's the same kind of feeling that anyone feels when they have to enroll in a complex federal program. So I think what we have to acknowledge is that all of these digital citizenship tools, like anything that creates efficiencies by doing it online, and we know there are efficiencies that way, create hurdles and barriers and make things more difficult for a lot of people. And especially if those people are people that don't have internet access at home to begin with. So I think sort of acknowledging that there is a human component, there is a time component, there is a effort, kind of a comfort level that takes work to overcome. So it takes support. It takes the support of individuals and organizations to help people get through that process, to explain it, to point them in the right direction, to give them the confidence that they're going to go through this process and end up with an internet connection at the end. That type of thing is really, I think, important, and important to acknowledge that it also requires time, energy, and resources to do it well. So libraries are really well positioned, for example, to do this work. They have staff who can spend the time helping people through a process. There are other organizations that have those similar resources or have connections. But like, how do we get these organizations together that complement each other, that, who has access to the people that need to be getting this benefit, who has the skills necessary to get them online, who is the trusted voice that will allow everyone to feel like this is a process they want to be a part of. Those are all complicated. We can do this coalition building work now so that we're better positioned in the end to work together to make this happen. But I think it starts with an acknowledgement that it's work. It's work for the individual. It's work for the community that's supporting those individuals getting online.
I would just add that, and Lauren already alluded to this, but this is phase one of Lifeline modernization. Right now, this is our hook. This is our way to get everybody enrolled in the program that we hope is going to be a successful program for years and maybe more to come, right? This is people enroll in programs that are relevant and useful to their lives. And for far too long, Lifeline has not been that for many. And EBB, I think, is our opportunity to really get out there, hook folks into the program, and then be able to work towards modernization that will continue to work for them for a lasting impression. So this, I really almost see this as being phase one, right, of Lifeline. Also making things simple and easy, as Lauren was describing. To be totally honest, I can't understand Lifeline. I have spent so much time reading Lifeline rules, trying to make sure I'm understanding, can it apply to broadband, in what cases, what kind of data caps apply. All of these different types of questions are very challenging to figure out. And you can be an expert in the field and still not have clarity about how the program works. So making sure that things are simple, not just to enroll, but to understand how it's useful in our life. In New York State, we implemented not so long an affordable broadband mandate in the state and tried to keep it very simple. It's $15 if you meet these criteria. That's it. We don't need kind of loopholes and ands or ifs or buts and things like that. And so I think being very clear with the messaging about who it is that's eligible, what do you get out of it, and why should you spend the time to be able to go through the hoops that Lauren was describing.
Absolutely. I wholly agree with that. Did you have something to say, Lauren? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lucas. Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder too, I don't know if at this point people or decision makers still think that there are people that don't want to be online, but I think that was a persistent feeling for a while. Like people were choosing not to have internet access in their homes or choosing not to participate in the benefits that existed for them. I think the pandemic dispelled that myth, but I don't know, maybe this is just another opportunity to help make sure that that's clear, and getting people enrolled in this benefit could help prove that, yeah, people want a subsidy. They want to be able to get online. They want to be able to purchase this service for their homes.
Absolutely. I know to that comment, our executive director testified last week to the House Commerce Committee, and I remember hearing even still some people saying, it might just be a choice. People might be saying it's not for me. And I wholly agree with both of you that this is an opportunity for us to underscore that this isn't a choice anymore. And I think everyone listening to this call would probably agree that this has now become a necessity beyond sort of what we ever imagined. So I think that is absolutely a part of our outreach. And a question I have for you, Lauren, from the chat, from Gordon Wright, one of our audience members, was he would love to hear about the ways that school districts and charter networks can get their families signed up for the emergency broadband benefit.
Well, I think the first start perhaps is familiarizing yourself with the, who is eligible and how they enroll. Media Justice put together, I think, a really great website. I'll add a link in the chat, but it helps break down and asks you a series of questions. Would you qualify by income? Would you qualify because you have free and reduced lunch? And if you want, so one thing that's important for school districts to understand is which of your students' families would be eligible. So yes, if you have a student in your district who is eligible for free and reduced lunch, that family qualifies for the emergency broadband benefit. In districts where every student qualifies for free and reduced lunch, every household with a student could qualify. So that provides a lot of opportunities for schools to, to communicate this, to help point people towards the resources. And it probably varies district by district, how you would approach that. But I'm hearing from my colleagues that the good old fashioned flyer in the backpack is a really great way to start here. Letting you as a school district, you're a trusted voice. As a teacher, you're a trusted voice. Let people know this is legitimate. This isn't a scam. This is a real benefit that you could qualify for. And then I think, like we've been saying, look to the partners who then can help this family enroll if it's a challenge. If the school district isn't well positioned to do that work, and I can understand why at this point school districts are really struggling to meet a whole series of new requirements to keep kids safe and a whole other set of work. So who in your community is well positioned? Probably maybe it's your library. Maybe you can reach out to the director of the library that serves your community and say, can we refer people to you for this work? Or is there another organization that you can refer people to? So let them know about the benefit, let them know it's real, and then help find the resources to help them through that process if the school district isn't ready to do that work.
That was great. Thank you. And I will underscore Lauren's point. I love librarians. So turn to your librarians. They are some of the greatest people on the planet. So taking a bit of a shift, we've had a question in the audience that lines up with a question that I had been thinking about. And I've been thinking about places where the EBB is still falling short. And one of our audience members, Ashley Pickett, asked, what do you all see as a potential solution for those that live in areas with no hardwired access and poor cell phone or satellite service? She said, don't get her wrong, the EBB is a fantastic step in the right direction, but they see so many rural areas that fall into a different gap that isn't always addressed.
That has been our mission in our office for many years. And it's absolutely correct. It is naming a very, very real issue, which is broadband deployment. And I think, it's important to think that what's being described here, right, doesn't only apply in rural cases, but as I mentioned, if your local ISP didn't sign up for EBB, then you don't have it as an option available to you. And so I think it's we have to, as Lucas was talking about earlier, we have to think about things very holistically. So we have to have rural deployment as part of this conversation. It has to be ongoing. We also have to have opportunities to be able to increase options that may be available to somebody at their home. What are the other ways that we can do digital inclusion and make sure that people are getting access to these services? So I think we have to think of these issues holistically, and I think they'll be most effective. I think this question is something that we should be raising and talking about, because that keeps it on the list of things to do and of work that we need to get done. Unfortunately, in many cases, right, these projects can take a lot of time. It can take years to be able to do some of these deployment efforts, but we need to start that planning process now. And I think, in all honesty, right, we have an incredible moment right now on broadband infrastructure generally with the American Rescue Plan Act, with the American Jobs Act. This is the moment to be able to do this type of work and to be able to bring up these questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Scott. And a clarification question for you, Scott, that was put in the chat. I know you mentioned the minimum mandate in New York State that was just implemented. Harry, one of our audience members, was wondering how that interacts with the EBB. And I think a few audience members were confused about the $15 mandate versus the $50 subsidy.
I will say that I am not the expert on this. Our Public Service Commission in the state is charged with implementation and are working through those very questions right now, right? Our program will go live in just about a month. I think it's June 14th or maybe 16th, that providers are required to begin offering this. And these are exactly the questions we're working through right now.
Awesome. Well, Harry, thank you for that question. We will absolutely be sure to follow up with you when we get some more information to make sure you know. So a question that I have for both of you, sort of looking forward, our optimistic hats on, what do you two see as measures of success, either in New York or across the country, for the EBB?
That the money's out in 3 months. 2 months. No, I say that jokingly, but right, that we need early enrollment. We need enrollment out the gates so that this isn't the type of program that takes 4, 6 or more months to be able to set up. So I think posting high figures, enrollment figures this month, next month is going to be critical, because that's what people are looking towards, right? The question that Lauren was mentioning, when people are saying, maybe broadband just isn't that relevant. Well, if we don't have early enrollment numbers, that question gets empowered, right? That question kind of takes off and, oh, maybe this program isn't really what's needed. Maybe we don't need to be focused on affordability. It starts to introduce all this type of uncertainty. So I think early enrollment is going to be critical and something we should be looking at. Also, how ISPs or others, these networks that we're all creating, are getting engaged, are being built, that kind of social capital, that social infrastructure, I think is going to be an important element of success, right? If we think about this as phase 1 of Lifeline modernization, then we have a great fight ahead for us in the years ahead, in building that kind of social infrastructure now. And then finally, in my personal sense, maybe Lauren shares this thought with me, is what share of the money New York gets. I am hopeful that New Yorkers take up all the money and that we get great enrollment figures in our state, and then we can roll things out nationally. But we need to keep up the momentum. We need to get folks enrolled so that in Congress, when they're talking about putting new money into the program, when they're talking about long-term solutions, right? Biden's been kind of alluding to the need for long-term solutions here, that we're showing that there's real need, that we've built the coalitions we need to be able to keep this moving in 6 or 8 months.
Yeah, a +1 to everything Scott said. I think that's exactly it. And I think that, I think that the fact that it's an emergency solution is obviously it's the drawback, and the fact that it's a zero-sum game. Like, we would love, instead, I think I would love prefer a program that was everyone who was eligible, who enrolled, got this benefit. But instead, basically we're competing for these very limited, these 2 limited resources. But let's max it out. Let's get every single person we can enrolled early and getting that benefit, and then use that success to build onto longer-term solutions.
And I would probably just echo what both of you have said. I know there's been talk in Congress about a more permanent solution like this. And I think Scott's point that the fastest, earliest enrollment we can that runs out the money is going to be the best example to, policymakers that this is needed long term. But I know we had a question asked by one of the audience members about balancing the fact that we want to reach out to as many people as possible and enroll them, but also knowing that the faster we enroll people, the more quickly people are going to lose the money when the fund runs out. And I don't know if either of you have any thoughts about sort of balancing that. I know you both sort of touched on this already, but what that might look like for people who are doing outreach, knowing, each additional person is, X amount of time less that the program will probably be in place.
No, it's a flaw in the system, right? We wish there was more money and that would go to more people and would last longer. But let's just keep saying that, hey, the subsidy is great. This is what people need. Affordability is an issue, but this probably isn't enough. And let's prove that it's not enough. And keep in mind that there are other solutions too. There are other approaches to affordability. Like, work that Scott's doing through the Broadband Program Office to increase networks and to increase models for internet service delivery, and make sure that we're always keeping this both and kind of thinking in place. So so the emergency broadband benefit right now is a limited benefit, but it's important and it addresses an important issue. That's not to say that that supplements other efforts to increase broadband infrastructure or increase access opportunities. These are things that we've been through enough these past 18 months. We know how to juggle multiple concepts at one time and keep communicating about what's important.
I think Lauren's entirely right, right? When you create caps on programs, right, there's always this ongoing effort to cap the Universal Service Fund. And we're only going to have so much money available for Lifeline. We're only going to have so much money available for this. And what that's doing is, right, making us compete. It's making all of us who are on the same team trying to achieve the same thing actually have to compete with each other. And that is by design. Right? That is not, that didn't magically happen. That's something that's by design, and it's a policy choice. And so ultimately, the only way to overcome that is demonstrating the need for a long-term sustainable solution. And that's going to be burning through this cash as quickly as we can. I really believe that.
Thank you both for that. And we have a question. This sort of alludes to what you were talking about earlier, Scott, when you mentioned that the first people that New York State reached out to were your ISP partners. And we had a question from Rondella, who's an NCC member. But I didn't know if either of you had some really good examples of how ISPs have reached out to municipalities, to school districts, to other community organizations, sort of to build these partnerships.
It's certainly happening. In my position, I don't really want to highlight any one of our grantees. I'm going to hear about it from all our other grantees that are doing great work that I didn't bring up, but it is happening, right? There's presentations that are ongoing. People are finding events to be able to invite government speakers, municipal officials, others to be able to come. I mean, I think that this event is a great example of what ISPs can and should be doing locally, right? It's so often, and Lauren may be able to agree with this, but right, in government, it can be very hard to stand up something new, right? And so creating a platform and be able to invite folks at the local level, at the state level, even at the federal level to come and speak, and creating those types of forums are really powerful. And I know that a number of ISPs in our state are trying to actively set up those opportunities. And it's something that I think is particularly exciting.
Great, thank you for that. And Rondella, I will ensure that Next Century Cities finds some examples as well that are public that we can share to our EBB resource page to highlight sort of some models that people can adopt in other states. So the last question I have for you all, and please continue to ask questions in the chat if you all still have them. And thank you to our teams who have been answering the very technical questions while we've been talking. I've appreciated that. But walking away from this call today, obviously the portal is live. And we expect more ISPs to get on board in the coming weeks. But what can participants, the 120 people who are with us today, do right now, this week, next week, sort of in the moment, sort of first step? If they were to walk away from this and say, how can I activate my resources? What is sort of the big thing that you would ask them, or you would tell them to do rather?
I mean, for me, I know one of the things as I was learning about the EBB program to begin with was I was feeling nervous that I wasn't qualified to become an expert in this. Oh, it's so complicated. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to answer all the questions that are coming through in the chat. But what I realized was when I reached out to my network of partners, just like Scott was explaining, we had a conversation. We said, well, who do we call to learn more? That there are a number of organizations at a national and a state and even regional and local levels who have already done the work of helping to explain the program, of helping to develop the tools to communicate it. Those resources exist. So I think a great thing for anyone to do now is to realize that you don't have to be an expert to be a champion of this and to be a champion of the people who are not connected. So go ahead, check out the links that are in the chat, look at them and share them. And then I think if you're in a position to share funding, to share resources, find ways to connect individuals who need access to this benefit to the organizations in your communities that are best positioned to help them get online.
I'd say two things immediately come to mind. One is make sure your local ISP is enrolled. If they are not enrolled, then start asking why, make other folks organized as why. Go to your state broadband program office or whoever else, or Public Service Commission, and help them to try to apply pressure. Make sure that everyone's who's kind of enrolled to be able to supply the benefit. But the second part is, and this actually may be more harking back to I used to work on Capitol Hill, and I always used to tell folks the best way to get things done is to make them easy. And again, this is just what I was mentioning just before about creating forums like this, but make it easy for people to be able to engage. Make it easy for a municipal leader to be able to engage. Create the materials, right? Do that kind of education, but then just say, I've actually already prepared the email that you could send out to your network. I've already done this work for you, right? Once you've done that, then it's just a simple answer of, okay, great. Can you share your email network? Can you post this? Here's the perfectly prepared, small blurb about EBB. Can you host it on the website? And things like that. And doing that kind of work up front, I think, is really important, and makes it easier for other folks to be able to engage who, as Lauren mentioned, may not be experts or feel that they're experts, but being able to step in and fill that role, I think, is really important.
That's great. Thank you both. And I would just have to say, when you walk away from this, like Scott and Lauren have been saying throughout the whole thing, it's just reaching out to as many people as possible who are eligible or who might be eligible, and encouraging them to go online and check. I know I've seen a few people in the comments ask, has the link been sent out? So what information is available? And if you go to getemergencybroadband.org, that is USAC's website that they're hosting in order for you to go through and test your eligibility. I clicked through the portal this morning myself. It's very easy to navigate. They've done a great job of helping you test that. And you can always turn to the FCC's website, or like I mentioned earlier, the nextcenturycities.org website. We have brought together a number of resources from New York and across the country to point you in the right direction. And I've also linked directly to the FCC's frequently asked questions, which, from what we've gathered, they're updating almost daily as people call in with more questions or more tips for things to post. We also, after this, will be looking back over the chat transcripts. And if we've missed any of your questions, or if there was something very technical that we may not have had an answer for, we are absolutely going to follow up on that for you and get back in touch with you. Lauren, Scott, I don't know, do you all have anything else you would like to say before we wrap up? If not, that's okay.
I'll say thank you, and thanks to everyone for being here. I've loved watching the chat and seeing the resources that are being shared. We'll continue at the State Library to push those resources out and continue to find opportunities for people to learn together. So thank you, Lucas, and thank you, Scott, for being part of this partnership.
Yep, agreed. Thank you. And just noting, our office is absolutely a resource, and folks should always reach out to the broadband program office here in New York State or in whatever state. I really want to plug this as being, a really important space in state government on this work, and absolutely encourage everybody to reach out. I have the great pleasure of knowing many state broadband leaders and directors across the country, and I can really assure you that they're all dedicated civil servants who want to see this program successful. And so make those contacts, do that outreach. And if you're in New York, then that means me, and I look forward to being able to work together.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. And I want to say thank you to you and Lauren and Scott, for joining us. I know you all probably have very busy schedules, especially with everything going on right now. So thank you both for taking time to chat with us and for the work that you're doing across New York. I know it couldn't be happening without the two of you. And thank you to everyone who joined us for this call. And like I said earlier, to our teams who have been answering your questions in the chats. I encourage all of you, if you have outstanding questions, Next Century Cities is actually joining a Reddit Ask Me Anything immediately after this at 2 p.m. The link, I believe, was just put in the chat. If you have more outstanding questions, please feel free to join that on Reddit. There are a number of policy experts and technical experts who will be at your disposal to let you know even more about the EBB. And again, I encourage you to visit the Next Century Cities website, the New York State Library website, the New York Broadband Office website, and any of these resources to get more answers and more resources. As the coming days and weeks play out and we learn more, I know we all will be doing our best to communicate that with you. As soon as we know something, I know at Next Century Cities, we try to tell everybody we can so that everyone stays on the same page. So thank you all for the work that you're doing in your communities across New York and from around the country. And we are excited, and I know that I am encouraged and optimistic about the EBB and the work that we're doing to get everyone online. So thank you for everyone for joining. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. It's simply lucas@nextcenturycities.org, and I am happy to connect you with anybody possible. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and I hope you all have a great weekend.